right, what you doing?
So I'm good moving. This was out in the sun because it had to dry. This is not Phragmites. These are cattails, which I love. And my friend has a whole swamp outside his house. It's beautiful, many flowers. It's an amazing place for bees to live. It's just so wild and wonderful. And these cattails grow in it. He went and chopped some down. And they're kind of spongy in the middle. They're not exactly hollow, but they're hollow at the top maybe, but just not down here. They're very spongy and heavy. So they were filled with water, and I wasn't going to make a raft. It was saturated with water, so had them over there in the sun, and I'm putting them back now.
Okay.
So that was Doug Tyson on his property, and Miri helped put them together. He has 100 acres in Riften, and he's trying to start an agrarian community. So if you're interested in being part of a community, he has a pig farmer and maybe a ginseng farmer, and maybe horses were coming. And so he has a lot of people coming to him to see if they want to share business with him and creating agrarian economy, and plus building community on 100 acres. And also trying to figure out what the governance is. He's going to work co-creatively with people. It's not quite established, so if people are interested, they can contact me.
Okay.
And I might be there. And this
Well, let's take a break.
cattail, which I love, is from that property. Anyway, but we can talk about that. So this can be B-roll. This can be me. This is something I got as, I guess it's for material for the arts, I'm assuming. And I wet it overnight to see if it can be made straight, because it's so curly I can't work with it. It's a natural wood material that could make a beautiful, gigantic sphere that would deploy off Lady B, and kind of like when the rocket ships, when the capsule ejects from the rocket ship, and she's going to release this giant sphere off the raft as a kinetic sculpture might do. And I need to straighten it in order to work with it. I normally just take material from the environment, but in this case the Phragmites broke when I tried it, and I tried it with other the willow and the vines, and it didn't work. And I saw this and I thought it would work, and I don't think the fish are going to mind a little bit of wood. They may not. Yeah, so it also carbon material binds heavy metals out of them. So I'm Dee Dee Malker, and I'm working on a sculpture for Earth Celebration's Ecological City Pageant. This is the year 5 of doing this sculpture that's floating and also cleaning the water, or the estuary, an ecosystem that is through my lifestyle that's been cultivated over at least 10 years in the East Village. I've been here for more than that, but I wasn't part of the community gardens until 2009. Through these networks of ecological and systems change that's been going on in the East Village for Lower East Side for 30, I don't know, forever probably. But the gardens I think started in 30 years ago, over 30 years ago. So I'm doing this sculpture in mind of the regenerative movement culture, where we're trying to create the byproducts of our lifestyles are also good for the earth, ourselves, and each other, creating more connectivity, deeper supply chains, and helicopter noises. And resource flows. One of the main ingredients I use I go to the bottom of the food web, which would be the microorganisms. And I've met Shig Matsukawa, who shared with me many years ago the EM1 product that he uses to ferment food waste. And there's also a culture in Japan or around the world that makes, that ferments the EM1, but they have leftovers and they use it in their household cleaning and in their grease removal, and they use it as a fertilizer. It was made as a fertilizer. But actually, they're also using it to clean waterways, and they've cleaned, I use the word clean, but I use clean because it's easy for people to understand quickly. But the word isn't clean, it's to make more healthy. We're not actually cleaning the water, that would be too clean. So we want to create healing for the waterways, which is making it whole again, through using the microorganisms as a tool for that, a bio-tool. We make biospheres. And the biospheres were created by the grandmothers in Japan, who decided to use the dumpling as a form that would bring the EM1 down to where the sediment is, where the toxins are, to break down the toxins. And they were doing that. So these are not mud balls, but this is the mud ball material. And we can add a little bit of clay, and which is used, but we don't always use clay. But the clay helps it form. Here's a face. I made one amulet to put in. I was going to make more for all the gardens. Here's one, and it's white because this is the lactobacillus, the yeast and phototrophic microorganisms that are creating a white beneficial film fluff on top of the sphere. But that goes away. It dries and it goes away. And then we throw it in the water, it goes to the bottom, or it doesn't matter, but it should go to the bottom because it's heavy. And that's where it will create microorganism action, which is oxygen, and then it will eat the waste, break the toxins down to their elements, and those elements are bound to carbon, and then they float to the top. I don't know if it's actually carbon, that's just my assumption. It probably isn't good to assume. But I know in the soil variety, lead is bound to a carbon, and it's made safe. The soil is safe from the lead if it's bound to a carbon, because it can't go into the food web from there. It goes into the, so you can eat the peaches, for example, or the kale. So in the soil, the detritus and the heavy metals are, they float up to the top with the oxygen bubbles and where they're bound, and they float down the river, and that's where they can be eaten by the birds, and it's safe for everybody. And there it is, clean water.
Okay, should we take a break?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Another smile, please.
Are you taking pictures? Why do you want me to smile?
Well, it looks nice when you smile.
But I don't want a fake smile.
And look at the ball.
Make me laugh.
Laugh. Look at the ball.
Say something funny.
Oh.
So I developed in 2009, after I took a permaculture course with Andrew Faust in the East Village with a lot of community gardeners. I developed a collective called the Masters of Succession, kind of playing off the idea of the Master Composter course, and Masters of Compost. How about the Masters of Air, Water, and Soil? Or how about Air, Water, Soil, and Selves? So we're including people too, right? And so I did that for Figment, because Figment was asking, what will you bring? What do you want to bring? Which is a great question. And so it really engaged people, many people, thousands of people, into bringing their creativity forth into an event for the weekend. And my thought is, how do we start a regenerative culture, lifestyles of beneficial succession, which I call LOBS, LOBS. So it's MOS, labs, Masters of Beneficial Succession, which is MOBS, MOBS, LOBS, lab. And so I started that in 2010 at Figment. I brought together a community of people not just teaching composting, but living a life of what would create compost. So we were usurping food waste from people, taking their food waste. We had to give them apples because when we went there, we discovered people weren't eating fresh food, so we couldn't take fresh food to make it composted. And then at the same time, I met Shig Matsukawa, who is fermenting food waste. So you don't actually have to have fresh food. You can have any kind of food and ferment that. And it takes 2 weeks to do that, and then it turns into soil within 2 more weeks. So you 2 weeks to ferment it, and then you put it into the worms or back into the ground where it becomes soil for growing food, better food. So as your soil gets better, then your food gets better, and your soil gets even better, and your food gets even better, and your soil gets even better. And so I did a mini compost also with the same idea. So creating betterment through food waste recycling. So that's the lifestyles of beneficial succession. How can we? What do you want to do in the place you want to see? So I ask people what they want to be in the place they want to see, and then hopefully they think about that, and then we all come together in one place, which I call the ephemeral piazza, and we come together and we do that. And so through doing what we want to do, as long as it cleans water, air, and soil. So all of a sudden we're doing what we want to do, but we also have to look at our supply chain or our supply web, our network, and our resource flows. And are they good for the earth? Are they good for the water? Are they good for the soil, air, and cells? So we're going to hit one of those. Some people, aren't getting at everything. Obviously, the acupuncturists are using these needles and the plastic and the little the whole thing isn't going to be a beneficial succession, but we start somewhere, and we start with, okay, well, it's good for people. It's good for ourselves. Acupuncture is good for us. So we can start this community network, and when we come together, we actually grow our network, and we find resources that might be better than the ones we're using that actually create betterment. So, for example, there was someone cutting hair. She wanted to cut hair in her future life, and then I'm also listening to the Buckminster Fuller Institute Design Science Studio, and there's another person every 20 minutes for 10 days. And one of the ideas that they talk about is future casting, forecasting, backcasting, and future casting. So which is a little bit what I'm doing. So I'm asking people what they want to be in the place they want to see, which is future. Doodling the future is another way we get together. And then we can walk backwards and find the steps to go forwards. And we're basically doing that, but we're doing it in a very present way. We're actually starting now. It's not kind of the future at all, because we're working with the present. And through our present connectivity, we're making connections. So the person making mushrooms connected with another artist using egg cartons to make sconces. So it was Gil Lopez and Ann Lee. And Ann Lee was making giant egg balls, so with egg cartons. And he said, oh, can I use your egg cartons to stuff my peanut shells and my mycelium to create what he was calling micrometeorites, which go under trees, and they go into the earth, and they create a mycelium network, recreating it in places that were just mowed, parks that were like really mowed, like in Governor's Island, which is where we were doing this. And the hair waste person, so she was cutting hair, and the hair was going into myco booms, which we're going to make for this sculpture. The myco booms, myco hair booms. At the time, it was just hair booms, and the hair would go into these tubes that we put on the water, and on the water surface, it gathers the oil on the surface of the water into the hair, because hair absorbs oil. And then it's saturated. This is what they're doing in the Gulf and in other parts where after like Valdez, all these big oil spills are using hair or synthetics. The synthetic booms don't work as well because they don't sit on the water at the same level as the hair does. That's just using a waste as a resource. So it's more we're taking our waste and creating resources out of them. We're making sure what we're doing is creating an organic waste. So maybe I'm not going to use something that's when I have a choice. Sometimes we don't have a choice, but we're hoping that these choices are being created every day. When you look on the internet, you see people who are inventing things all the time. They're creating more biophilic options for our shopping pleasure. So the idea of working together in a small community is that we're actually not having to shop. We are using someone's waste. So the earth, we start with the earth and the microbes, and we start with the mud balls or the worms and the seeds. And these, we have to go way back to the beginning of time, really, like to start this over again. And where did we go wrong? Where can we start? Where do we start? These are just questions. I have no idea. But my thought was we start with the soil and the microbes. And then from up there, we continue up. And then when people come in to do acupuncture, that's kind of further up the chain, isn't it? It's because we're using needles. And when did we start making needles, and how can we make needles biophilically? Maybe we can't. Maybe it's not possible. Maybe it is. I think it's probably possible. We just haven't done it yet. So if we put humans to the challenge, I think we need it. So we have a new challenge for the next years to come to recreate everything with better materials that serve the earth and take away from it. One of the other ideas I heard on the summit call, I've got so much of this in my head because I've been listening to it as I create this sculpture. The idea, no, I forget what I was talking about. So anyway, that's sidetracking. Listen to those and you'll get lots of ideas. And yes, so Claire on the call, she calls that dynamic emergence. So when we come together in these ephemeral piazzas, which I call them, when we come together with what we want to do in the place we want to see, we have what she calls dynamic emergence. I just love it. And there's all these people and what they've discovered and thought of, and everything they're sharing is just, it's feeding me so much. It's gonna well up. It's so exciting. So I want to just say that the lifestyles of beneficial succession and the masters of succession, the beneficial succession of air, water, soil, and selves is a byproduct of everything we do. And that sculpture that I'm making, after 10 years of doing all these other things, is accumulated in this offering. It's not I'm just making a sculpture. This is a community project. I'm designing it, and people are bringing in their contribution through my network. So I've created a network, and it's their network. It's not just my network, it's our network. And through our relationship here in the East Village, in the gardens on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, we have a lot of, and it's not just here, it's all over the city, maybe upstate and downstate and across the country and around the world. So we're connected internationally here for sure. Keely came over the other day, yesterday, and she stopped by to say hi, and she's working with her, she's from Africa, and she's working with the country that she's from, and a small group of people to grow food, because she grows food in Eastern New York, and we're talking about how to get people engaged in growing food. And they don't really seem to care, and she's like, well, I just teach my cooking classes in the garden. She has amazing cooking classes and kale salads and everything. And people come or they don't come, or she just wants people to come and plant food. She's having a hard time getting people to come and plant food. I don't have a solution really, just keep doing what we do and enjoy what we're doing. Another one of the ideas, Lucian from the Regenera phone calls at Buckminster Fuller Institute, his ideas, this game called United Planet, and he's talking about the idea of constantly celebrating the future. Like we're celebrating the future before we've even gotten there. And the idea that why does the party have to stop? We can just be excited about what we're doing, even though it hasn't happened yet, or we're working on manifesting it into reality. So the sculpture is sort of the idea of celebrating, and the whole of what Felicia's doing with her celebrations, she's celebrating the little bit of what we have done. Well, we haven't achieved a lot maybe, but we have like our rain catch systems, and we have green roofs, and we're planting food, and we have community events. We're having an opera here next week. There's so many things happening because we're working with the soil and the gardens are bringing people together, and there is a beneficial succession happening here, and we can celebrate that in the little bits of it we have. And hopefully that will bubble to the top, and we can keep this network growing, because we really need support. It's really, really hard by ourselves, and maybe it's not important. Like, you feel like, oh, this isn't really important. Like, okay, well, our future on Earth is important. So maybe it is important. I don't know. But these little things we do. So it has to be enjoyable. This is what Lucian was saying in his game Up. You know, let's make it enjoyable and live in the bliss that we're creating now. You know, live in this wonderfulness if we can. If we can afford it. So that's what I'm doing with the sculpture. And thank you everybody who's contributed and been a part of my network. I know it's hard to make time to get here or to bring things here, or you have ideas, but it's okay. Just having the idea or having the interest in saying, I like what you're doing is a lot and very helpful. And I appreciate the little bits that people are. And I'll go over all of the great accumulation we have. This is one of the booms. I'm going to fill it with hair. I need to finish sewing it. This is going to fill with this hair. Are you looking at? So I guess I can come and show you. This is the Angora goat hair from Kathy Puffer's farm in Rosendale. She also has a CSA, and she makes honey and maple syrup. And the apples, she's got so much growing on there, and all these animals and chickens. But anyway, this is going to absorb the oil off the surface of the water after I put it in that, and it's also create a ballast on the side of the raft, so the raft won't tip into the water. Well, it could tip into water, but hopefully it'll help. The downside of all this. I guess human hair wouldn't smell so good. So, yeah, so this is where I'm going to put, so we have the booms that are on the side of the raft, and I'm making these sconces. Last year I did them with willow. Willow's a lot lighter. This is kind of a heavy vine. I'm starting to use the other willow vine, and we have this heavy vine from Jacoby from his backyard. I don't know what it is, but I really like it. It's just that it feels kind of heavy. But hopefully the myco booms, the hair booms, will be buoyant enough to hold it. I'm not sure it will, but there it is. I'm going to continue this, and it's going to hold the oysters, so the oysters don't fall into the bottom of the water. I could use a few more of these, and a little smaller. It's kind of big. I wanted to make it half the size. Yeah, so there it is. I wanted her head half the size too. So, so what I'm doing is I'm weaving the willow through here, and I have so far. I started with these 3 sticks at the bottom, and I really like this one. That's kind of a lighter color. That's very geometric. Hopefully that will stay prominent, and there's a way I can make it prominent. The idea of having a lot of yellow flowers, which I don't have, because it's starting to look like a bee. It was a Martian, and now it's a bee. They made the head so big it became a Martian, which is fine. It's great. Like, we love Martians, and now I think it's a bee, and I wanted this to be kind of a slinky, so I need more willow. I'm running out of willow, and also it has to be timed, because now the willow is sort of dying. It's not going to be yellow anymore. I like the yellow, but it's not going to stay yellow very long. The yellow is going to turn brown, which is going to look fried. The idea of the ephemeral sculpture, but to keep it ethereal as well. So I have the stinger, and I wish I had feathers. I'd like to have feathers back here, hanging off of it to accentuate it. It blends in with the background, which is fine. And this is, a little girl added this yesterday. I'm going to keep it on until we put it in the water, because it was kind of sweet that she added to it. And so here's the bottom of the bee. It's kind of very pregnant bottom part. trying not to step on things, but I don't. And so I'm going to build up this a little bit more. I'm going to make this a little more opaque with other vine, and maybe build up this part. I haven't done that yet. This will go on the raft. That little sculpture is made actually for the inside of her. To put it in here, so I'm going to put that down and put her on top of that sculpture there, like a hidden cat inside her, inside the bee. And so I have the soil here for the mud balls. To make the mud balls sculptural, I had to add more clay to the soil, and I have Jacoby brought from his backyard also. Jacoby Zaretsky is an artist who made these amulets. And so I have dirt here from him, which I can add to make things more sculptural, and I also add at the end a clay, like an earthen plaster kind of thing if I want to do that. And I have and over here, I have from Manon at our celebrations, this is from their dye workshop, the dye workshop for making turmeric, and the red clay and the spirulina mix the green. So that's what they were using for a workshop. So I have their leftovers. I can use that to create some color if I want to do that. And this is also from Material for the Arts, maybe from the costume supplies. I want to make a giant, like 5-foot sphere that could be kinetically deployed from Lady B, from the outer orbits, and we'll see how that goes. I got it wet, but it's starting to dry. It needs to be straightened out, and that's that part of it. I made these feet. The idea was to have a smaller sculpture with giant feet, and now the sculpture is kind of grown, and the feet are smaller, and I don't even know if a bee has feet. So do I want to use them? But anyway, I have these feet made of EM1. And they're turning a little white because of the bacteria, but that will dry, eventually turn back to dark again. So that'll go down here on the raft. What else do we have here? We have the Phragmites. Here's the Doug Tyson brought his cattails from his swamp. He has this beautiful swamp outside his house. It used to be a farm, a beaver dammed it, and it became a very shallow meadow swamp area. It's so many wildflowers, it's crazy. So it's really a beautiful place. It has no mosquitoes because it's so biodiverse. Anyway, he collected some of the cattails, and I'm going to try to use them on the raft. Hopefully it's not going to be too heavy. But I did dry them for 2 days in the sun to dry out the wet stalks. And the Phragmites also is from the beach. J.C. Augustin and Anna Wadowski went on a bike ride out to the beach, and they collected some Phragmites and biked it back for me and brought it to the garden. And George Hiroche and myself, we wove it together in 3 threes. Rose taught me how. Rose, she's a gardener here. She taught me how to do that. Let me show you what I do. So we take 3 Phragmites and we just tangle them, like we braid it maybe twice. You can't really braid it much because it breaks if you braid it too much. So, and then I take the 3 threes and I do it again in a 3. So we have this, and then we bind it all together really tight. Try to use, if we have enough of the willow, we'll use the willow to bind it. And you can see it through the tension, we can use the willow just as well as we can use a string. So I prefer the willow if I have enough of it. Otherwise I use a natural thread. And this is the cattails, which is the very spongy body. It's not spongy because I dried it now, but that will absorb water, and it probably would be a very good float. Make a very nice. So yeah, so these are the tubes. They're going to hang off the side, and then we'll have oysters in here, and we have bladderwrack kelp. Bladderwrack kelp is something that grows on the side of the water. You'll see it floating, kind of. It's the kelp with the little bubbles in the leaves, and it kind of floats. So you'll see it on rocks, and on the rocks you have the kelp, and the water comes up and the water goes down, and the kelp can be dry or wet, and it comes back to life. And the mussels can either grow in, the kelp grows out of the mussels, or the mussels grow separately. But the mussels are attached to the rocks, and the kelp is attached to the rocks, and it's all very tight, and it's in there, and it's de-acidifying the water. The mussels are filtering the water, and the kelp also, it's a plant, it sequesters carbon. So there we go, it's a pretty cool thing. So the more bladderwrack kelp we have up and down the East River, the better. I'm going to cover the thing with kelp. It grows like a weed. I want to try to grow it myself. I've tried a few years ago to grow it, and my bubbler stopped, so it kind of got funky. And then my gallery space was over. But it would be good to have a space to do these biophilic experiments. So we have a stockpile. We can be stockpiling myco hair booms. We can stockpile mud balls and seed balls, and we can make grow oyster mushrooms to remediate toxic soil. There's so much we can do. We can just keep making these, and they'll just be on storage for whoever wants to use them. I think it could be something the city could have, where classrooms and people could come in and just make mud balls or make these biophilic remediation tools. Who else is going to do it? It's a citizen science kind of project. So, and it also connects people to our environment and our microbial cells. Yeah, so over here on the bench I have things that I'm going to decorate it on the last day after I finish this. We're going to put it on a cargo bike, and the cargo bike, we're going to decorate it with, people bring medicinal plants. There's some dried flowers from my friend's mother's funeral, so that's kind of a memorial to her. You know, people put special things on here, so it's a special gift to the water, and it's also a giving of life, and a regenerative life also. And Jacoby made some mud ball tangle, they look like purses. And I'll put those on. We have the bio-leading sculpture. I have horseshoe crabs. Horseshoe crabs, to me, kind of are stewards to this water. These water sculptures that I do, I feel like they are leading the way, and like in reverence, and because they're these ancient. They're so ancient, right? They're a fortress with their shell and their pointed nose, and they kind of, they're grounded and mellow, and they have this presence that feels like they're stewarding us and leading our way and kind of guiding us or protecting us. That's what I like, the horseshoe crabs around it. And they're so connected to the moon and the circadian rhythms and the ocean. It's really beautiful to have them part of the sculpture. Back out. No, this is. I also have, Jacoby's bringing some more rock dust. There's different types of sparkly dusts to add to her. And different colors of clay paint coming soon. Yeah, so the idea of stockpiling is really stockpiling these biospheres. It's part of,
Let me go over here.
I forgot to talk about the moss pedagogy.
Oh, you want to do that now?
I guess we could, or do you want me to go over here and talk about it?
Well, yeah, whatever you want to do. Let's see. Let me just get.
This here. These are the sunflower stalks, which are nice because that's the, in honor of the Ukrainian disaster, genocide. Try not to go any further. Careful with this branch right here.
What?
don't need so much of this. I just working on it. When I was at Grace Exhibition Space, I put together, I was just going to make mud balls for every person who died of COVID, but I ended up doing much more than that because COVID just kept going and going and going, and we had lockdown, and we just stayed there, and so I was there for a month, and then another month, and another month, and I was there for 6 months. So during that process, I was making the show. I was calling it Lifestyles of Beneficial Succession. And then what happened was I ended up changing it to Microbes to Metropolis, which seems to make sense after I ended up putting together all of the elements I'd been working on over the past 10, 12 years. And it did have a movement from one, like phases from one to the next. It seemed to fit together in what I thought was a progression from microbes to growing a metropolis, which is sort of what we're doing when we're making the ephemeral piazza, and which is also called the Mud Ball, which is a celebration of bioremediation and symbiosis. So the pedagogy goes, it starts with the biophilia. There's 6 steps, and I started with the biophilic, and I called it the Harbor Phytomycomoss Molluscan Me series. It's chapter 1. No, it's not chapters. I decided to make them chronicles. Chronicles and chapters. Chronicles, books, and chapters. So Chronicle 1 is the biophilia, microbes, micro, moss, mollusk, and me, which covers the elements that we make spheres out of, or we make biotools, biotechnologies, where we want to stockpile these and put them into a warehouse, had we had it, or a workshop area where we can stockpile them and have them ready for civic purposes, cleaning the city. And so that's phase 1, or Chronicle 1. And then the 2 is the 2 mythology. So the myth. Of, for me, I was doing a character that I created in 2000 or 1998, 2000, over the decades. This character came to me as a girl who was living in caves underneath the ground. And this, we started doing in 2009, we were talking, a group of us who are doing permaculture, we're talking about doing a show for Food Network, because they were starting another channel and someone knew someone, and we were meeting, and well, who is going to be the spokesperson, and who's going to be the spokesperson? It's going to be a person who's not from this world. It's going to be another person coming in, basically having to download this information, and I came up with this character, I think because of that question that we were asking during this ideation period. That never really happened, and we kind of all went our own directions, and I came up with the idea of this character from an underground civilization, a network of caves. They have light, and they have such an advanced culture of technology, high tech, everything. So we have everything that we have now, but it was biophilic and better. And so they were much more advanced. So when you're working with nature, you can go much faster. If you're working against nature, you're always going upstream. Although salmon go upstream and they do pretty well. But that's another subject. It's another story.
Oh.
Where was I?
Upstream, going against nature.
So we're going with nature. It's like Aikido, where you're going with things. You're on the side of nature, and you can harness that to create more and more and more and better. And there's also entropy in all that. So after that phase, so this is the myth phase. So we're creating our own myths. There are 6 chronicles, and the first one is the biophilia, and the next one is the myth. The next one is creating our who we want to be in the place we want to see, and that means making costumes. Well, that's what I did. I prototyped the costume. So one of mine was a hydroponic vortex, which was a hydroponic system in your home, and then you could actually wear it to the farmer's market and sell things off of it. There's also the mushroom shower curtain that you can take off the shower, and then you can wrap it around, and you can go to the market and you can be the mushroom marketa and selling mushrooms off. And then I made a cape because it wasn't enough, there wasn't enough mushrooms to survive, so I made another cape so the person could have more abundance, more to trade or barter. There was also a money system I created. Little honeycombs. I created a money system, an exchange, a currency. So we also have currencies. Some people create currencies, and there's other people who do different types of costumes, and it's also part of who they want to be and the place they want to see is creating these ideas, this imagination. It's all imagination of how we can live in the future regeneratively. And so that's 1, 2, 3. 4 is after we go through, and when I had the show, I had an area for wellness, and in that wellness area, I had the Harlequin costume, which is the Harlequin, the hallucination for the Garbagia project that's run by Lois Saida, and the hallucination station, which was Rolando Politi's idea. I created a hallucination Harlequin, and that was the steward through into our imagination that would draw, which would help us doodle the future, bring us the ideas that help create the future, because we were in a place in COVID where all of the things that we thought were where we were going, we were planning the future. We knew what we needed, and all of a sudden none of that was important. Like all of a sudden we had to not be together, we had to be apart. So all of this separation, and like, oh no, now what are we going to do? So we really needed to go into a state where we would meditate or do shaman circles and dreaming circles. So dreaming, and so the mugwort came into play. We went and picked a bunch of mugwort, and we made mugwort pillows, and I made mugwort buildings, pillow buildings filled with mugwort. And this Harlequin, so stewardess into the area, the next phase, which is storytelling. And through our stories, through the community telling stories, and just listening to people and letting them tell our story and the story of the land and the culture, and bringing that together and creating data and mapping that. So then we brought Green Map in. We were mapping all of this data of the stories. Well, this is the idea. I don't know if we actually mapped it, but the idea is that we would do that. So that's phase 4. Phase 5 is doodling. I call it doodling the future, where we're actually imagining. I had my permaculture system design of a village. I have one of a community center, a cafe, an event space, an animal shelter. So I had 5 or 6 different doodles that I had done of systems design plans that some of them I was paid for. They were more than doodles. They were quite elaborate schemes. And after that, so that's phase 5, doodling the future. And also that includes gaming. I had some games that I had developed. So I'm inviting people to do this, not to see what I've done as an inspiration for them to get involved and start creating games that are imagining the future or making systems design. How would we live in the East Village or the Lower East Side? Because we're going to have, we have global climate catastrophes happening. How can we live better? And I'm inviting people to doodle the future. And after that, that's Chronicle 5, and Chronicle 6 is actually the ephemeral piazza where we live in. So actually, well, Chronicle 5, we also, one evening I invited people to come and, out of cardboard, create these ideas that we had drawn on paper. So we were drawing a pedestrian bikeway that would go from the Tompkins Square to the park, to the river where we'd have a marina. And so we were making these out of cardboard and sticks and everything, and we would put them as a little diorama out in the tree pit, which is a very big tree pit. And that was really fun. So I would like to do more of that. So more of the Phase 5, Chronicle 5, and each chronicle has many books in it. So maybe book 1 is games, book 2 is community spaces, book 3 is. So these are doodling the future, and there's so many ways within that to create the future. And then the next phase is living it. So we're living the ephemeral piazza, where we actually get together. We have our who we want to be and the place we want to see. And maybe you want to make natural cleaning products, or maybe you want to be a meditation teacher. Maybe you want to, like, who would be a hairdresser or a rocket scientist. All of these ideas can come together in the same place. So it's not like we're all off doing our own thing. We're actually in the piazza. We live in the village together, and we come to the piazza in the evening, like the Italians or the Europeans come together, or a lot of cultures, they come together in the evening. Because their architecture, their spaces, their settlement design is sort of this circular, piazza-oriented, high density, with public promenades and coffee shops. So that is Phase 6, and that's the end of the show. So that's my pedagogy for Moss, Mobs, Labs, Lab.
Okay.